I want y'all to really look and pay attention at this title right here and what I'm about to read to you. And if I wasn't scrolling through Twitter, I would not have found it. So this is coming from the New York Times. It says a COVID-19 relief fund was only for black residents, then came the lawsuits. Oregon earmarked $62 million to explicitly benefit black individuals and business owners. Now some of the money is in limbo after lawsuits alleging racial discrimination. This is what we're going to have to worry about when it comes to reparations. Think of this as a prelude to that. They were going to give $62 million specifically to black residents and business owners, black-owned businesses who were affected last year due to COVID-19. Now, mind you, we got shut out completely from those initial rounds. But when they finally roll around and say, look, this is the money we're going to give you, in come all these people who want to interject. Now, I was kind of spoiled before going into the article, but wait until you hear who jumped in and played interference. It's amazing. We're first in line to get a vaccine. Well, not first in line, but first to be put out in the forefront to get a vaccine. But we're last for this. And when it finally rolls around, then it's an issue. But like I said, this is a prelude to what will happen when reparations becomes a topic, or when they start to, if they ever decide to start rolling those out. I'm going to go ahead and just get into the article and see what other BS they talking about, because wait till you hear who jumped in front of the bus. Black civic leaders in Oregon heard the alarm bells early in the pandemic. Data and anecdotes around the country suggested that the virus was disproportionately killing black people. Locally, black business owners had begun fretting about their livelihoods as stay-at-home orders and various other measures were put into place. Many did not have valuable houses that could tap for capital, and requests for government assistance had gone nowhere. After convening several virtual meetings, the civic leaders proposed a bold and novel solution that state lawmakers approved in July. The state would earmark $62 million of its $1.4 billion in federal COVID-19 relief money to provide grants to black residents, business owners, and community organizations enduring pandemic-related hardships. Now, see, there it is. They said that this was book approved back in July. So you're talking like what, 6 months ago, 6 or 7 months ago? It was finally being honest. This is who needs the support right now, said Lou Frederick, a state senator who was black. But now, here's the but now millions of dollars in grants are on hold after one Mexican American and two white business owners sued the state, arguing that the fund for black residents discriminated against them. Those three right there are the ones who are holding up black people's money for the state of Oregon. Black business owners and black people just in general. Those three, one Mexican American and two PC people, individuals, are the ones holding it up because they feel they're being discriminated against. But when we're discriminated against, which seems to be all the time, we're just told to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep it moving. Now, mind you, the people that that feel that they're being discriminated against get so many benefits as it is, but they want more. They want ours. They want the people of Oregon. They want theirs. Let me continue. The dispute in Oregon is the latest legal skirmish in the nation's decades-long battle over affirmative action. Here they go with that again. Mind you, affirmative action was supposed to be for black people, but look at who it went to, white women for the most part. and comes in a year in which the pandemic has starkly exposed the socioeconomic and health disparities that African Americans face. It has unfolded too against the backdrop of the BLM movement, with institutions across America, from corporations to city councils, acknowledging systemic racism, and activists demanding that meaningful steps be taken to undo racial inequities. Politicians, social scientists, and jurists have long clashed over how the government and institutions should go to repair the harm caused by racial discrimination, and the extent to which past racism should influence today's decision. In creating the Oregon CARES Fund, lawmakers took the rare step of explicitly naming a single racial group as the beneficiary, arguing that black residents have been subjected to unique discrimination that put them at a disadvantage during the pandemic. See, that's the thing. They only was expecting that by putting out there that black people were most likely to get this virus more so than anybody else, that it would just mean just that. They didn't expect them to go and take it a step further and go completely left field and say, well, we're going to set aside this money, $62 million. Mind you, it's only $62 million out of $1.4 billion. It's not even $100 million rounded up, or rounded up to 70. It's just 62 out of $1.4 billion. That's a drop in the bucket. And they don't even want them to have that. What does that tell you? That's why I said this is like a prelude to the reparations conversation. See, they feel like if we can't have a piece of what you get, then you're not getting anything at all. And mind you, they're up against 3 measly lawsuits. Racial discrimination. Now imagine if 3 black people tried to do this. And they probably would have a bigger leg to stand on, but because they're black, it wouldn't go anywhere. They'll have every excuse in the book as to why it's some BS. Well, this right here is some BS, what they're trying to do. Like I said, they was only expecting, they announced that they're most likely to get it, and that's, that'll be that. They didn't expect that black people specifically was going to get relief. They feel like, see, that's the thing. Everybody can be for themselves, but we the only group that has to all lives matter, everything that we do. But some of it is our fault because we open our arms of kindness to everyone. That's one of our biggest weaknesses. Our notable strengths is also one of our biggest weaknesses. The ability to like and to share and be open with damn near everybody. Over the decades, various remedies to address discrimination have been met with legal challenges. Supreme Court rulings have established that race-based policies are constitutional only if they achieve a compelling governmental interest and are narrowly tailored to do so. The court has most notably allowed race to be used as a factor in college admissions to achieve student at diversity, but the court in recent decades has also sided against one of the original rationales for affirmative action policies to undo past discrimination and its lingering effect. Meanwhile, you had those palm-colored people, like 50 to be exact, 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, who did for some with the unthinkable, for us the not so surprising thing of scheming their kids' way into getting into these colleges, but they don't want to talk about that. They just want to harp on affirmative action. Because apparently we're too dumb and stupid to go to their little precious Ivy League schools. You have to show that there's this really close nexus between why you're using race and outcome you're seeking, said Melissa Murray, a professor of law at New York University. And I think here it's going to be a real question as to whether funding just black businesses through this CARES fund is actually the only way that you could address the problems that black Oregonians have experienced during this particular period. In Oregon, the stakes are dire. Nearly $50 million worth of grants have been awarded, but a court has frozen $8 million, the remaining amount minus administrative costs, until the litigation is solved. It's a process that could take years. With Congress having recently extended the deadline to the end of this year for states to expend their CARES Act fund or return of what remains to the federal government, some worry that lengthy litigation could mean the money is lost for good. So basically it's saying, oh, we're going to tie this thing up in litigation, and then when we decide that we don't want to litigate no more, we're going to release it to the people who need it. But before you know it, they're going to have to give whatever is left over, which will end up being a lot, back to the government. Imagine they tie this thing up in litigation all the way up into, say, November. Who's going to spend $62 million in less than a month? And then, like I said, it'd probably be just a couple of weeks, because they probably going to demand that before the month of December is out. They think they slick. Oregon's long history of anti-black racism has fueled much of the advocacy for the state's fund, and while other racial groups have said they supported it, critics have argued that black people are not the only ones who have faced discrimination in the state. Here we go. Here it is, y'all. Here it is. It's funny they don't want to talk about discrimination before this, but when money is involved and black people are on the major receiving end of it, now out here comes every other group to talk about the racism they face. And 9 times out of 10, many of the ones that's coming out saying this have been very discriminatory against black people. Some black residents who make up about 2% of the state's population said that argument was a distraction. As a state, as a country, it is unusual for us to provide adequate resources to black people, said Nkenge Harmon Johnson, the president and chief executive of the Urban League of Portland. For some folks, it's shocking, it's distasteful. But Edward Blum, a white conservative activist whose organization Project on Fair Representation is underwriting one of 2 lawsuits challenging the fund, said the opposition was about preventing racial exclusion. Of course. It's like in the employment arena, going to apply for a job and seeing a sign on the employment office that reads "No ages need apply," said Mr. Blum, who has led efforts to challenge race-based admissions policies at universities, including a high-profile case against Harvard. Your race and your ethnicity should not be used to help you or harm you in your life's endeavors. How many years, and even still to this day, do white people use whiteness to get into certain institutions? Just because it doesn't have a whites only sign on there, or it's not a ad that's looking for white people, doesn't mean that it's still not there. It's called systemic racism for a reason. It's a system. A system that Palm Colored has been benefiting off for since the inception of America. Because they wrote the book, they wrote every document to benefit them and only them. They may cut a little corners and let some people slither on in, but that's all they're going to let in is a slither of people. But now they want to rewrite everything because now black people are on the receiving end. I'm telling you, they do not. Listen, not far removed from their ancestors. Walter Leisure, a plaintiff in one of the lawsuits, said he might be on the verge of laying off employees from Dynamic Service Fire and Security, the small electrical services company he started in Salem in 2007, if he did not receive relief money soon. An earlier loan of about $20,000 from the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, he said, was just enough to cover payroll for about 2 months. Mr. Leisure, or Leha, who is 64 and white, said he could not say whether historic discrimination put black business owners at a disadvantage, but a particular fund, he said, was not warranted. Wait a minute, hold on, time out. He said he could not say whether historic discrimination put black business owners at a disadvantage. Did he just really say that? Look at what he said. Historic discriminations put black people. He can't really pinpoint if that's the reason why black people were at a disadvantage in Oregon. The key word there is discrimination. Of course that would put black people at a disadvantage, you dummy. And he says, but a particular fund, he said, was not warranted. To the black people out there, do you want to know why Dr. Khalid Muhammad called them devils? You're hearing me read this. That's what this right here is a case study as to why he said that. And several other black people who had that mindset. It's discriminatory, he said. It's locking up a bunch of funds that can only be used by black businesses when there's a ton of other businesses out there that need access to those funds. It's not a white or a black thing. It's an everybody thing. Man, if this wasn't so disrespectful, I would swear that it was a joke. That lawsuit, a class action case led by Mr. Leisure and the white owner of a logging company, Great Northern Resources, based in the city of John Day, is one of two that challenges the fund. The other, underwritten by the Center for Individual Rights, a nonprofit law firm advocating limited government, involves a Mexican-American owner of the Revolucion Coffee House in Portland who has claimed discrimination. So much for that black and brown unity, or coalition. Many of today's economic and health disparities stem from past policies and practices that were explicitly racist. Some social scientists say, arguing that measures aimed at particular races were necessary to undo the damage. But courts have set a high bar for allowing the clear use of race in legislation to get around many legal hurdles. Policymakers tend to rely on proxies for race like zip codes and socioeconomic status when designing measures, but they hope will benefit marginalized racial groups. But Akasha Lawrence Spence, a state representative, says subtle measures were not enough for the current crisis. Specifically targeting black Oregonians for relief was an important step in forcing people to grasp the effects of racism, she added. This fund says that we understand that for no other reasons than the color of your skin, you have been restricted and prohibited from accessing the tools to economically mobilize, she said. For that reason, we're not going to create any veiled language. We as the black community are tired of that. Supporters of the fund argue that the $62 million accounted for about 4.5% of what the state received, leaving plenty for residents who are not black. Now listen to that. They said this, that's why I said in the beginning, I said the $62 million out of the $1.4 billion that they're giving out to people is nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. And they said this is only 4.5% of what the state received because the black population is very small. But like I said, they don't even want black people to have this. They let them tell it. They wouldn't even let them have $1 million. They would say that's too much money. They literally are showing their ass. If they've never done it before, they're doing it in this article. They said it's fine when black people are suffering. They like when we suffer, but when we can do something to pull ourselves up, so they like to say, then this stuff happens. This right here, to the people that are listening, this is how systemic racism works. And notice, no time did you hear the N-word be dropped. They didn't have to drop it. The fact that 3 people can sue the state, and this is what's putting the funds on hold from 3 people claiming racial discrimination. Like I told you, they never care about racial discrimination any other time except when it involves black people getting something that is owed to them. That's why I said this is only a preview of what it's like if black people are able to get reparations. And that, of course, is on a more grander scale because it's way more money involved. They're basically telling black people, you don't deserve this money. You should just be fine with what you have and we'll take it and do with it, because they feel that they can do better with the money than we can, because there's always this stigma that black people are horrible with their money. And they're the ones that put the stigma out there. Let's not talk about how many white businesses have folded because their benefactors or their beneficiaries fucked up the business. Let me continue. Let's see. They also noted that other COVID-19 related funds were tailored in a way that allowed them to almost exclusively benefit particular racial or ethnic groups. A $10 million fund created by the state that largely benefits undocumented Latino immigrants, and one created by Portland officials to aid a district largely Asian-owned businesses. Listen to that. Undocumented immigrants, Latinos, and one created for Asian-owned businesses. Not one time did these 3 individuals come out and get a lawsuit in place for those 2 groups, and one of them are undocumented, which means they are not even legally supposed to be here. They are illegally here. But they didn't say anything about them. They didn't say anything about the Asians. But when black people get something, and you know what I think it is? Because to me, it sounds like black people were getting the bulk of it. That was probably their other issue. Not just the fact that black people were getting the money, but the other fact is that black people were getting a lot of money. They were getting too much money in their eyes. See, back then, they would just destroy the black towns. Back then, because, they can get away with that. Now they have to destroy them within the system, like what they're doing right here. So this, to the black people that's out there listening, I get tired of hearing some of you talk about, oh, black people don't do this and black people are lazy and this, that, and third. This right here is showing black people are not lazy. At least not all of us. A lot of us like to work for our bread and butter, but it's people like the three that are trying to sue to block this that are hindering the process. But you never go after them because y'all are scared of Massa and Miss Ann. You'll never call them out the way I'm calling them out, or the way that Professor Black Truth calls them out, or the way Jason Black calls them out, or anybody else who's willing to call them out because you're scared. Many of you wouldn't touch this topic with a 10-foot pole. It says designing measures in that way to target black residents would be difficult and fail to have a significant impact, they said. Oregon's history of racism predates its statehood. As a territory in 1844, it passed a law banning African Americans from settling there. Sounds like a sundown town that a piece of the Sundown series that I will definitely possibly hitting on when I get to the state of Oregon. The state's black population ballooned in the 1940s as many Southerners migrated west for jobs in the wartime industries. Like in many parts of the country, the new black settlers in Oregon were restricted to certain areas. In 1990, 80% of the state's black population was confined to 2 zip codes. In Northeast Portland, according to Stephen Green, a Portland native and former banker. Banks and other investors largely avoided doing business in those communities. Residents were also displaced when part of those neighborhoods were razed at different times to build a highway, a sports arena, and a hospital. That history robbed many African Americans of opportunities to build wealth, historians say, and that history extends around the entire nation. Are you hearing this? What they just said right there can apply to the rest of the states where black people reside. The racial wealth gap in Multnomah County, which includes Portland, is larger now than it was 40 years ago, with black residents holding fewer assets than other racial groups. In 2019, black Oregonians received 4 of the 984 loans that the Small Business Administration issued statewide. Now listen to that. 4 out of 984. That means that 980 went elsewhere. These 3 right here that's bringing up this lawsuit didn't complain about that because it was only 4. And it was most likely not anywhere near $62 million attached to it. But they said, oh, well, you know what? We're going to give them this money and specifically have it for them. There's where the issue lies, because it's specifically for black people. That's really all it boils down to. If they said people of color, they wouldn't have had a problem with it because they knew it wouldn't have gone all to black people, and black people probably would have got the short end of the stick. Without traditional banking relationships, black business owners often have had to reach into their own pockets or seek other avenues to finance startup costs. Civic leaders said that many unable to get pandemic relief loans offered by the federal government because the loans required going through lending institutions. Early in the pandemic, various indicators appeared to show that black businesses were suffering more severely than others. A Stanford University study found that the number of black business owners nationwide dropped by 41% from February to April, compared with a 32% decrease for Latinos, 26% for Asians, and 17% for white owners. So that shows right there that black people were affected the most, but they don't care. All they care is that black people can get this money, and they feel that they shouldn't. Lawyers defending the Oregon Cares Fund have argued that the state has a duty to ensure that the distribution of COVID-19 relief funds does not perpetuate the disparities black residents face. That means targeting black residents for relief because other efforts to address inequality have failed, said Janelle Bynum, a state representative who was black. Without that intentionality, without them actually caring that the money flows through our communities, they'll never have to do anything to change the status quo. She said, I'm not okay with that. But some legal scholars and a lawyer for the state legislature said the fund could violate the 14th Amendment's equal protection guarantees. Clark D. Cunningham, a law professor at Georgia State University, was dubious of the 14th Amendment claims about a month after the amendment passed Congress in 1866. Those same politicians reauthorized the Freedmen's Bureau, an agency meant to primarily help formerly enslaved African Americans. The idea that, in this case, a lumber company could use the 14th Amendment as a weapon to prevent the descendants of slaves from receiving an economic benefit in a time of disaster is utterly inconsistent with the historical context, Mr. Cunningham said. In Portland, Joy Mack said the pandemic rekindled the stress she felt when she opened the Jaya Rose Salon in 2008. She and her husband, an engineer, are both black and solidly middle class. But after visiting more than 10 lending institutions to try to get some startup funding, she received only 2 loans. One of the leaders kept asking for more financial information, so they eventually walked away from the relationship. In trying to keep her hair salon afloat amid the pandemic, Ms. Mack, who's 45, says she applied for a forgivable federal government loan, but was turned down because she had about $5,000 in tax debt. She got a $5,000 grant from the city and a $10,000 disaster loan from the federal government. She also has had to take out lines of credit. Ms. Mack eventually received a grant from the Oregon Cares Fund. Although she would not say how much she received, she said it saved her from having to close down under the weight of tens of thousands of dollars of debt. Honestly, she said, that is what just helped us get over that move-it hump. This was a very interesting article, and it was written by this black man by the name of John Elligan. It was an interesting article, but it was also a stressful one, as y'all could tell by the tone in my voice in certain parts. But yeah, they have a lot of nerve. But this article right here, like I said, serves as a case study of what's to come when we demand or are demanding reparations and what to expect. But that part I made about black people, I'm so serious. Like I said, you have a lot of black people out there that really think with that palm-colored mindset and swear up and down that it's our fault for the positions we're in. Really pay attention to what I just read. Really digest and take in what I just said. This happened in Oregon. It's happening in Oregon, but it's not only happening in Oregon. It's happening many places and has been happening for years. But mainstream media, because they own that and they run that, will put out this narrative that we're so lazy. That's why I had to go in on Jared Kushner last year, because he pushes that same kind of thing. See, they figure if they do something like this, they'll keep it under wraps and then they'll keep going with the narrative that black people are lazy. But see, the thing is, they have to keep that narrative going because that lie has been going on for so long, that black people are lazy, that we're financially crippled, and we're stupid, and all types of other negative connotations that they could throw on top of us. They have to keep that going. It makes them feel good. This right here throws a wrench into their plan. They cannot have, even for a second, black people feel like they have overcome something, because black people have to be tied and linked and attached to a struggle, because that's the roadmap they have designed and laid out for us. That's their plan. And when this happens like this, it's like, oh, no, this wasn't part of the plan. We need to do some restructuring. Like I said, like I said in the article, undocumented Latinos got some money and they're not supposed to be here. Asian businesses got money, but black people, we're either supposed to share with other people and still get the short end of whatever we're sharing with, or we're not supposed to get anything at all. We're supposed to only get the crumbs. We're only supposed to get the table scraps. If that, some of them would rather have us starve. That way they don't have to worry about even sharing that, because maybe crumbs and scraps is too much. But yeah, 2 white men and 1 Mexican American. Like I said, that black and brown unity does not work. It just doesn't. And this right here is proof of that. Going to come out and talk about some racial discrimination, when black people have been facing racial discrimination for how long, but they make it try to seem like it's taboo. Oh, it was so long ago. Stop living in the past. Well, this relief that black people are supposed to get is supposed to be happening this year in 2021. I would hardly correlate that to being so far in the past. Sure, but I will say this, it does stem from events of the past that are still going on today. See, they want to forget the past so much, but they can't let the past go because they benefit from it. They just don't want us talking about it, or at least rubbing their face into it. Well, it's the truth. And these be some of the same people that try to tell you don't be politically correct. Be some of the main ones being PC all the time, especially when it comes to us and talk about systemic racism and Dub S. And you saw how the Mexican American aided in that. That's why I don't be feeling bad. When a lot of stuff be happening with them, I do not feel bad. Don't ask me to shed any tears. None of that. Granted, what be happening to some of them is messed up. But hey, that's a problem and an issue they can deal with their government. We have our own fish to fry. We have our own issues going on. This right here is an issue. These people, these black residents and business owners are trying to get their money. And you know they don't even like giving out money to black people like that. And that's a lot of money to give, especially since there's not a lot of black people there. So that is a lot of money. Now, I bet you if the black population was larger than that, they wouldn't have said nothing. But because the black population there is so small, 62 million for them is a lot of money to give. And now that's why they want to come out and say something. But they showed their hand when they did not say anything about Asians and the Latinos, the undocumented Latinos, when they gave them specifically money. There was no outrage there, based on what I read. But when black people get what's supposed to be owed to them, now in comes the conflict. And they want to talk about and scream about racial discrimination. They are full of shit. But I'm going to go ahead and end the video on this note. Y'all let me know what y'all think about it down in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure you have your notifications turned on. To all, and I will talk to you in the next one.